Okay, so the next step, you're gonna wanna pull open the bag that has rails X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to deal with the X and Y high wind rails right now. The critical part with these, you do not wanna lose these blocks off the rail. If you drop these blocks off the rails, you'll either have to purchase new ones or contact Modix and they can get you replacements. It's just a large delay in your build. So this is the way that I do it so you don't lose them off the rail. Just do as I say and we'll see how it works out. So make sure your block stays somewhere in the middle of the bag. I've opened one end of the bag and just pulled it out slightly. Attached to it, you're gonna find these little small brackets. These brackets are basically C brackets with a small Allen key in them with a small grub screw. When you pull the grub screw out, this bracket will actually slide over the high wind rail. And once you have it locked on, you don't have to worry about losing the block. So now you can safely push the block outside of the bag, pull the rest of the rail out, and make sure you put a stopper on the opposite end. Next rail, we're gonna do the same thing. Open up one end of it, hold the block so it doesn't go anywhere, expose one end of your high wind, loosen your grub screw here on the edge. Now, sometimes as this one here just happened, these brackets are a little wide. I just grab them with my pliers, give them a small bend. And then they'll fit on the rail. Again, you don't have to apply a lot of force to these. You only just want enough so that it grabs. Push your block outside of the bag and then pull the bag off. Okay, so that's your X, Y, and Z high wind rails ready to go. Gonna have to do this again for the Z axes, but I'm going to move on with this process right now. And let's see if we can get these installed. All right, so on two of these, which is going to be our X axes, two of the rails, hammerhead T-nuts. So I need M3 by 10. And our spring shim. So we're going to start at one end, drop a springs washer, drop our bolt in there, and our M3 hammer nuts. These ones are going in the 40/40 extrusion, so we want to have the large M3s. So when you're putting these onto the hammer nuts initially, just put them on with literally one or two threads. You want to have lots of space so that you can actually align this and drop it into the 40/40 extrusion. So in this particular case, when we put these together, we're going to put them in every third hole. So one here, skip two, put one in the third one, and keep going the pattern until we get down to the end. So just a quick note on this one. It does say to start at one hole, add every third one. At the very end, you're gonna have two together, which is just fine. I would sooner not leave the last hole open, just stick an extra nut and bolt in it. All right, so I have the two rails for the X and the one for the Y axis already done with the drop-in T-nuts on them. I'm also going to do the Z axes at the same time. So the process is the same, just the rails are a little longer. Again, open one end of the bag, put a clip in, slide your block out. Once you remove the bag altogether, you can put your other clip on the opposite end. Same pattern with these. M3 by 10 millimeter bolt with a spring steel washer in one end, and then every third hole all the way down. So now that you have that long, tedious process done, we're gonna take the 4 high wind rails for the Z axes, which are the longer ones. We're just gonna set those aside for right now. And we're going to concentrate on the 2 rails with the M5 4040T slot nuts on it. So the one with the smaller T-nuts and the extrusion, we can put that aside as that's going to be our Y-axis. All right. So that being said, we're going to orient these in the same way as they're going in the machine. The back of the machine is towards you. You take your first set of high wind rails, just give them a little tap against the extrusion to straighten up all of the T-nuts. And you can just drop it straight into the extrusion. Do the same thing in the front. Give them a little tap to straighten them all up. And just drop them straight into the extrusion slot. So when you set these up, it's actually important the distance that you use for these to set them up side to side. When you're looking at the machine in this orientation, same side as the bracket, the edge of your high wind has to be 70 millimeters from the edge of the first leg. So measure 70 millimeter, just give it a little snug. And then measure over here and you should be at 50. So 70 millimeters on my left, your right, 50 millimeters on my right, your left. Once you've verified both distances are correct, you're going to use the alignment tool. This alignment tool is actually something that's done by Modix. They will include 2 printed copies of it in your kit. They do provide the STL file in the customer zone that you can download in case you happen to break one. So the alignment tool works easily, lays on over top of the high wind rails, and once it's on there, all you do is push the back bracket towards one surface of the extrusion, and you snug down one of your bolts. When you snug that down, verify that it grabbed into the extrusion. Verify your distance, 50 millimeters. Then come back to the first side, loosen your screw up, put your alignment tool on this end, make sure that you're centering the high wind rail in the extrusion, and then you could tighten down the last screw again. You have to loosen these screws almost all the way out in order for the T-nut to flip over in the extrusion. So once you have this end and this end both locked in, the rest of the rail should be straight and aligned properly in the middle of the rail. So you can remove these and work on down the line to tighten up the rest of these bolts. Once you tighten up the bolts, you feel it get tight, give it a little shake to make sure that the T-nut switched over under the extrusion to make sure that it's supporting it properly. If you see any movement in it at all, release the screw all the way and then just simply retighten it again so that T-nut can change. Okay, I'll come over on your side and we'll do this rail. Okay, so with our last piece of high wind rail and our piece of extruded aluminum, process is very similar to what we've done in the frame itself. I usually pick up the high wind, lay it on so all of my T-nuts get laid out straight. And once that's done, I can just drop it straight into the channel. For this, you need to be 43 millimeters away from one end and 47 millimeters away in the other. So I am going to do 43 on my left. So 43 millimeters is there, which should leave me with 47 on this side, which it does. So I am just going to tighten this down into place. Once I get the first nut tightened, I'm going to double check my distance, 43. And at this point, I'm just going to use my fingers and feel down the edge of the rails and make sure it's centered on the extrusion. I'm going to tighten up the opposite end, and then I can do everything in between. All right, so the next part of the process is we're going to install the linear rails for the Z-axes. So same as what we've been doing them all along. Just going to give all the T-nuts a little knock, and they will drop right in there. So the distance from the bottom of this, or sorry, from the top of the bottom rail to the bottom of the Z linear rail is 54 millimeters. So you measure it from there to the bottom of the rail is 54. I'm just going to temporarily snug that one in place. 54, make sure it won't move. And now I can go with our centering jigs again. Put our centering jig on the linear rail, push it to the middle of the extrusion, and tighten down the top end completely. Then we can come back down to the bottom, loosen that screw, make sure it's centered up, and then tighten it for good. That being said, everything else should be in alignment. If you want to do a double check, you can always take your centering jig, place it in the middle, and you can tighten the center one down if you want. Just remember that every time you tighten a screw, give it a little tug, give it a little push. Make sure that that T-nut switched over underneath the extrusion. It's very important to get those locked in properly. Other than that, we will go through this a few more times and we'll catch up with you shortly. Okay, so the next part of the process is we're basically going to be putting in the ball screws. So the ball screws come in a plastic bag. The nuts and everything are already installed on them. When you're dealing with these, and as soon as you take them out of the bag, make sure you don't lose these nuts off. Just the action of holding this directly up, the ball screw will actually rotate enough and will actually fall off the end of the lead screw. So be very, very careful with these. Leave them in the bag until absolutely required. Other than that, we're going to start doing some of the other pre-work before we get to those. So essentially what we're going to be doing in this step is we're going to be mounting our plates here. There's going to be pillow bearings are going in. Brackets are going to sit over top with another pillow bearing underneath, like this. At the very top of the machine, you have this plate, which is going to go at the very top with another pillow bearing in it. There's a mid bracket, which is going to sit here, is going to bolt onto our high wind rails. That's where this is going to go. The ball screw is going to go through here. And then finally, the last part of it is we're going to put in our Z motors. This particular machine has 4 Z motors in it, 4 ball screws. Each corner works independently. So once you get the machine leveled, it will always stay level. So we'll jump right into the process. The first part of this is we're actually going to mount this plate at the very top of the machine, and then we're going to come back down and work right here. So when this plate goes in, the 2 T-nuts in the middle have the holes towards the middle where the pillow block is eventually going to sit. The outside one has the hole pointing towards the extrusion. So once those are in place, you can take one of the M12 nuts and simply place it in the last T-nut hole. And then what you can do is move your bracket into the correct place. You can kind of rough center the holes where they're going to be. And then use your Allen key to actually center the T-nuts in the holes where you want them. Now, you can snug this one down a little bit if you want. You don't need to at this point because we're going to install the pillow block later. All right, so moving back down to the bottom of the frame, I've already laid out the plate, the pillow bearing, and all the insert nuts where they're going to be. There is a very specific orientation to them going there, so refer back to the manual online to make sure that you're laying it in there properly. Just going to pop all of these in place. Okay. A little bit of a cheat I use. I should lay my plate on top and use it to line up where all of my holes are going to go on the end plates. Because this bracket's going in the corner, you have no movement front to back, left to right. So just lay the plate in where it's going to go. And you can basically line up the hole in your T-nut with the hole in the plate. Make your alignment process a little easier. So all of these except 3 are M5 by 12 millimeter. There's 3 of them are 16 millimeter. The 2 for the pillow block and the 1 for the bracket that goes in this direction. These 3 are 16 mil, and I'm just simply going to thread them in the holes to hold them right now. Pillow block is on. Everything else is M5 by 12. So once you go tighten these brackets down, pull your bracket very tight into the corner here. You can snug down the outside 12 millimeter here, the outside here. You do want to make sure your outside edges are flush. You don't want them coming back past the extrusion on the outside of the machine. So at that point, you can tighten down all of the 12 mil and the 2 for the pillow block. Leave this one loose because we'll have to remove it in a moment. Next step I usually go with is my stepper motor. I'll actually prep this and get this into place. For a stepper motor, you're going to want to put the Allen key holes at the bottom. Okay, so when you put these stepper motors together, you're going to notice there's 2 set screws in here. And the set screws are set 90 degrees apart. When you put this on the stepper motor, look for the flat spot on the stepper motor. Put one of the set screws directly over the flat spot. Have it level at the top. So the top of the shaft and the top of the gear are aligned. And then tighten down the set screw on the flat spot of the stepper motor. Once that's tightened down and snug, then you can set the other one. Now, to mount our stepper motor, we need 4 flat M3 shims. We need the M3 by 8 Allen bolts for 4. We need to put 1 shim, 1 bolt. When you put this in, make sure the plug for your stepper motor faces the opposite stepper motor, so the 2 plugs are going to face each other on the sides of the machine. Pop this up from the bottom, and we can start putting our Allen screws in. Now, at this point, when you're putting these bolts in, don't tighten down the stepper motor at all. You can snug it a little bit, but you're going to want to back it out maybe half a turn after that. You don't want it dangling, but what you do want for the stepper motor once it's in place is to be able to slide back and forth just like this. Next step is we're going to prep this piece that goes in over here. If I try not to throw it on the floor. So we're going to lay a pillow block in here. We're going to use the M5 sorry, 5 by 10. Here we go. For some reason it was in my head that it was an M4, but it was not. You can snug these pillows down without a problem. And we just lay that on one side for right now. So this is going to be the point where we start taking our ball screws out of the package. Again, I can't stress enough, have to be careful taking these out of the package. Do not let the balls fall off. Plus, they're extremely greasy. So I have to clean up a little bit afterwards. So when you mount these balls are going to get mounted to what they call the mid plate. So this is going to sit on this linear bearing with the ball screw that comes up through here with the ball underneath the plate. Now if I flip this around and show you the other direction, this side is open. So the open side will always be towards the outside of the machine. These brackets are actually mirror images of each other. So the same bracket on this corner is going to be the same bracket in that corner and vice versa. To get this set up, your ball screw is going to come through here. Make sure the flat edge is towards the outside of the bracket. Once that's done, you can secure that with the M4 by 16 Allen bolts. So you need 4 of those per. The last one on the inside is a little tricky. I just find if you lift it up, you can let it fall right in the hole on the inside. Once you get all 4 holes in, all 4 Allen keys in, you can snug them down. You don't have to crank them really tight. Now, just to show you how good the ball screws are, literally it should start falling on its own. So, next steps are, we're going to get the belts out. We're going to take one belt, lay it over the pillow bearing and over the stepper motor so that it doesn't get lost in the middle of the process. Let's grab our Allen keys. I'm going to loosen up these set screws a little. So when we go put this together, we are going to put the pillow block on first. Let me rotate this around so you can see a little easier. So our pillow block is going to go on first. Now, if at any point in time these pillow blocks don't easily go on to the ball screw, grab a little bit of ISO, a little bit of cleaner, high alcohol cleaner. Give this shaft a little bit of a wipe. Usually it's just the shipping grease is caught on and kind of prevents the bearing from going on very easily, but it should slip on just as easy as this. I have not cleaned this one, but I'm suspecting that at least one of them I'll probably have to in order for it to go on properly. The other thing of note on this as well, on the ends of these pillow bearings, there are actually set screws. These set screws have been loosened up just to allow these lead screws to fall through. So if you don't notice, it is actually a very tiny, I think it's a 1 or 1.5 millimeter grub screw that's in there. So there are 2 of them, again, set 90 degrees apart. So once we have that one in place, we can now put our 60-tooth gear in. Our 60-tooth gear goes in with our grub screws towards the top. So that will slide on over. So this is the orientation that we're looking at now. One final step before we actually do the install on this. Grab one of our T-nuts, our Allen key to hold it out of the hole. So that will just have to sit there on the inside. So if you have a look at one of these brackets, you can actually get it pretty close to where the hole is going to be before you actually get the bracket in place. All right, so with all that ready to go, we're going to hold all these pieces in place. Make sure your belt is over the pillow bearing. And then we're simply going to lift this. So I am actually in place properly, but there's not quite enough height to be able to get this to line up 90 degrees, so it'll drop into the pillow block. So, little thing I found with the last one I was doing, is if you actually loosen up the mounts on the pillow slightly, sometimes you just got to get a little bit of movement out of that bearing just to get everything to line up straight so it drops right in. And then once it drops in, everything is fine. So before we go on with the next step, we can leave this loose for right now. We're gonna take this last pillow block, we're gonna lay it in on the top. And once we have that in place, let's bolt this one in. We don't have to do it tight. We're just doing it so it doesn't move anywhere while we're finishing our assembly. So the way I usually do these is I will put it together loose, and then as I'm finishing putting it together, I'll tighten everything from the bottom on up. I like to move it somewhere around the mid rail. And then what we are going to do then is grab our M3x6 bolts. We need 4 of them. So we can now move our linear block up. It's going to fit very nicely behind the mid rail, and then we can actually screw it in. So again, don't tighten them down tight until you get all 4 screws in place. It will make the alignment process much easier. Once we have all 4 in, give it a little shake. These are actually conical screws, so they should self-center. I usually give it a little shake just as I'm tightening the first one down to make sure it sits properly. Then you can tighten those on the block. And just make sure that your ball screw is moving freely. It's not binding anywhere. Now we're going to go back down to the bottom. We're going to start tightening everything up, and we're going to start working our way up. So the first step in the process is we're going to take our belt and put it around our 60 tooth to our 20 tooth on our stepper motor. We can snug down our stepper motor at this point. Next part of the process is we're going to get this 12mm bolt back in the back here. Sometimes it's a little fiddly to get it in there, but once you get it in there, ball set wrench will get it, and then snug it up with your regular Allen key. Same thing with your pillow blocks. And remember, don't forget to put that 16 mil back in. As long as you haven't disturbed it too much, the T-nut should still be in the proper location. Everything down here is tight. All we've got left to do now is just the pillow blocks and all the grub screws. So we've got 2 in the bottom. When you're doing the one for the belt pulley, just make sure when you look at it that it's level with the top of the stepper motor, because you do have a little bit of adjustment with it. You just want it to be level so the belt is not pulling on an angle. And that's it. Give it a little spin, make sure it's not binding anywhere. And then our mid plate here is done. So just going to the top to lock down the pillow at the top. When you're tightening down these mounting bolts at the top, notice how I've got my hand out here and my thumb back here. I'm actually pulling the ball screw back towards the extrusion as I'm tightening it down. Because as you're doing that, this bracket is a set distance from the extrusion here, and this bracket keeps the extrusion a set distance here. So it always makes sure your ball screw is straight. And that's it. Your first one is done. You have to do that 3 more times, and then we'll see you back here in a minute.